Hey everyone, welcome back to a video. So glad that you are here to join me today for my 2021 sewing resolutions. I've been seeing quite a few of these from all of you all over on YouTube and other social media, which by the way, if I'm not here on YouTube for a while and you're wondering what I'm up to other than living life and trying to survive, I'm probably on Instagram, so feel free to drop me a comment, chat with me over there on that platform. I will leave all my links as always down below in the information bar, so don't forget to pop that open if this is one of your first times watching my videos. Wow, this video is going to be kind of a two-parter. We're going to talk a little bit about my 2021 sewing intentions, what direction I want to go in as a maker and sewist, and then I do want to touch briefly on what I learned as a maker in 2020. Just a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. I do have notes, so if I'm looking down, notebook is trying to save me, and I think this will be a great time to grab a snack, grab a drink, because we're just going to have a chilled, casual conversation. I'm not really timing myself or pushing to get this done in like a set amount of minutes, but we're just going to chat. I do, of course, have with me today my favorite mug, my grumpy but gorgeous mug. Those of you who've been with me for a while know that this is a fave. And also, of course, pointing out the obvious, there is a lot of pink in your frame today because I decided the pink wool cardigan is the right thing for the day. It is so cold. It has been so cold. So this is just keeping me sane and cozy along with my little instant cup of coffee there. So let's talk 2021 intentions. Those who have been around for the last couple of years know that I've transitioned from making very specific project-based plans to looser categories or directions or things to practice in that direction. So we really made a change over the last couple of years. And I think that's to do with understanding myself more as a maker and how I like to work. When I had very specific projects like, you know, the sew, what is it? Make 9, sew 9, sew 6, whatever. Those actually gave me a bit of anxiety over the fact that I made these plans in either the December of the year past or the January and planned them out for an entire 12 months. And usually by March or April, I am over some of those plans, either because I change my mind, and you're totally allowed to change your mind, but also sometimes new patterns come up. You want to make certain things because you're just feeling it rather than other things. It's hard to predict what you want 12 months down the road. So I eventually learned that having looser plans was actually better for me and ended up being a bit more productive and just worked well for the way I like to make things. So my 5 categories this year encompass, as one of them, to rein back on my purchase of sewing patterns. So I guess this is not really things to do, more like things not to do perhaps, depending on which way you want to see it. Essentially, I have amassed a wonderful collection of sewing patterns, both modern and a lot of vintage and retro, which you will know. I will actually put a link to my pattern collection down below. I have it hosted on Flickr. You can go through my album and see all of the paper patterns I own. Whenever I get a new one, I just add it to there. But I do notice I have this thing about trying to look for the new treasure. You know, especially if you love vintage and retro, you're always like looking for the next awesome thing that nobody else has, right? And especially with the vintage stuff, because they're out of print, there's no more. If you find it, it is like a gem, especially if it's in your size. Most of the stuff I have is still in my current size, and my weight, my measurements haven't really fluctuated too much. So all of those are still usable. But once I've gotten the treasure, I don't actually end up making it for quite a while. So I do want to think about getting less new patterns or new to me patterns and really working through the collection of what I already have. So I am not allowing myself to buy any more than 2 patterns for the entire year of 2021. The only exception would be if I happen to want to make a gift for somebody else and they're either very different from what I have, either measurements or the style of what I want in particular for them. I will go and get that because it's not meant to be, you know, make life hard for myself. But for me and my own sewing, I'm just going to keep to no more than 2 new patterns for this year. Okay, next. let's talk giftables. This is something I've carried over from year to year and I think it's wonderful. I can't really describe it, but I really enjoyed making small giftables for friends and family. For 2020, there's a lot of mask sewing, so I counted those as giftables. But for 2021 though, I want to power through and finish a project I started from my mom. Kind of a special little thing I've talked about before. I might go into it in another video in the future, but I've got a coat, cardigan jacket thing happening for her that I've never made, but there's this special piece of fabric that has a bit of sentimental value for her, and I want to make it into something nice for her. She doesn't do a lot of sewing anymore. Her eyesight's going, she's fussy, she's kind of over it, she's into other things, but I do want to get that done. However, I've been thinking the last couple of times I've been over at my parents' place that it would be really nice if they had a quilt on their bed. Now this is also coming from someone who said that after that single quilt I attempted, that I am not a quilter, that I have no plans to quilt again. But every time I look at their queen size bed, I'm like, it's such a beautiful place for a beautiful quilt. So I'm going to attempt a quilt for them. I initially thought about making a lap quilt because sometimes they'll sit, on the couch and watch TV and stuff and chat or read, and it'd be nice to have a lap quilt. But maybe a bed quilt. I'm not sure about this, but I'm thinking some kind of a quilt. I'm thinking something super non-traditional, much more modern, only a couple of big pieces to piece together and really just showcase the fabric and the color combinations rather than showcasing the geometry of the quilt. I am not sitting there doing little triangles and little squares for hours and hours on end. That's just, it's not me. But I do want to think about that. So if you have an idea for I guess a more modern quilt that is more color blocked and isn't too hard, I would love your recommendations in the comments down below. All ears about the quilt. So I think that's going to be like my big giftable project for the year. Then this goes into something that Alyssa from, oh gosh, what is her channel? Sewing Creativity, I believe, had mentioned. And she talked about how to get the most out of your sewing patterns, which is to make them more than once. You would think that is intuitive, but actually I totally think most of us get suckered into the new and the nice and the fancy, and you make something once, especially when you don't have a lot of time to sew. You are excited by new things because your sewing time is so precious and so little. You don't want to be stuck making the same thing over and over. It just doesn't sound quite as exciting. But Alyssa makes a point, because every time you make a pattern, especially if you're not into making muslins like me, every project, every new project is like a wearable muslin, and you don't get the opportunity to tweak them and to get them just right. So unless you fit so well into the fit models that the pattern was designed around, it's not going to be a wonderful perfect fit project right out of the bag. And I've learned this about myself, that this is one of the reasons I am perpetually disappointed by most of my sewing projects, because I don't take the time to remake the things to get them just right for my body. And one of the reasons I sew is because, well, things off the rack often don't fit the way I want them to fit. And on the other hand, I'm not taking the time to remake patterns, to tweak them, to fix them, to make them just right for me, and to get down to a couple of tried and true, sew it with my eyes closed kind of patterns. I actually think I just have one. I have one pair of pants that I've sewn a couple times that I feel really good about and just work well as casual pants. Those are my stripy like house pajamas, by the way, if you know what I'm talking about. But I think a goal would be to alter some patterns and to make them multiple times until I get that perfect fit. I am not a muslin maker, like I said, so every project is like a wearable muslin, but I need to push past that and then actually tweak my wearable muslins until I just get it, That's something I really want to focus on this year, and that ties into not buying more than 2 new patterns, because I want to work through my pattern stash and just find those gems and make them really, really well. So I'm going to be making a lot of similar things this year. But don't worry, there will still be a lot of options and choices in my collection. Now let's talk my serger. My serger is a wonderful machine and we are growing our relationship. But so far, I really only know one thing to do, and that's the 4-thread serge. It can do much more than that, and I want to spend more time investigating my serger, investigating the different seam finishes that it can help me create. I'm sure there's loads. I just never sat down to look through them and read the manual and watch the DVD and all of that stuff. But I think having those options and learning how to do them will open up my sewing to just different little tweaks and different finishes and ideas that will make it more interesting. So really the goal is to learn more seam finishes and also just learn my serger a bit more. Like this is, you know, my sewing machine and my serger, but my sewing machine, if you're doing seam finishes, is more like how to do them, whereas the serger is threading them for different purposes. So that actually might be something you would want to think about as well if you own a fancier sewing machine or a serger or cover stitch, whatever that it is. My last one is something I'm going to carry over from 2020, which is to continue exploring athleisure wear. I intended to make more and it just didn't happen in 2020, guys. It was all about like survival and just getting through the year. My sojo went like out the door so fast. Pretty much by March, when we went into our first everything shut down phase, was like, I am not coping well with this. For me, sewing works when I'm in a good headspace and when I'm in a positive space. Sewing for me is not recuperating per se. Like being creative is recuperating, but sewing in itself, I need to be in a good mindset for me to do any sewing, or else things are just not going to come, and I don't have a whole lot of motivation to make and to sew because it's quite finicky and fidgety. I need to be like laser focused in order for me to get any sewing done. So part of that, or this goal, does tie into my handmade capsule, mini capsule wardrobe that I've talked about before. I will link the video down below. But a lot of that is cozy wear, homeware, and I do want to nudge that into athleisure a little bit. I've been going to the gym more consistently over the past year, and I'm very interested in making up a couple of tops that are just kind of tunic length or a little longer, because you're wearing your you know, workout leggings, and I don't like when the general bum and the front area is so exposed. You know what I mean? And I want to wear something a top that's just a little bit longer, so it gives me a little bit of coverage. But there's nothing wrong with, you know, wearing a crop top or something regular length, but I just prefer when it's longer when I'm working out. So that's something I want to explore. And again, if you have a great pattern recommendation for something like that, I am all ears in the comments down below. So those are my kind of 5 general directions to work towards in 2020. You'll notice that none of them are specific projects, and I may have a couple of things in mind as months go, and I'll see how many of what I do fit into these 5 categories. However, I do also want to touch on 2020 and what I learned as a maker in the last year. I'm not going to go through and evaluate whether or not I've completed my 2020 intentions, because like I said, my sojo ran away from me so fast. And everything just became, you know, getting through the day, getting through work and whatnot. And I'm not gonna be too hard on myself about it, but I have noticed a couple of things in terms of understanding myself as a maker, and I think that's really important as well, to evaluate that aspect of your creativity or your creative journey. So one of the things I learned to do was to make buttonholes, and this came really late in the year, but I finally sat down and looked through the manual and, you know, did a buttonhole, and it was okay. The world didn't fall apart, my machine didn't combust, you know, it was fine. I made a buttonhole and it was good. It wasn't a perfect buttonhole, but it was a buttonhole, and the button went through it and it closed, and that is all I needed. So I feel pretty good about that zippers are still not my friend. I've done a few, they're not my favorite, but I feel less afraid of buttonholes, and I think that's a wonderful thing. Another thing is knowing where my limits are with stuff. And this in particular came from a project I had made where the fabric was really thin and floaty, and I could not get past how to adjust the tension on my serger to get the fabric not to do funny things. I tried differential feed, I tried adjusting the tension on all 4 of the threads. It was a nightmare. So serging tension drives me bananas. My regular sewing machine tends to be okay, I don't run into those troubles, but man, the serger is a whole other beast. And that's something I need to just overall continuously work on. But that was a thing for 2020. I also learned that I need to sew multiples of the same item so that I build experience working with the item and the instructions and the procedure to put it together, rather than going for the new thing all the time. And of course, this ties in with the 2021 goal of making, you know, perfect fits and sewing something multiple times, because I learned, and I don't know why I didn't think about this sooner, you know, every time I make something and it's new, it's always hard because it's your first time making them. And I do get discouraged when things don't turn out right, but why am I expecting them to turn out right when it's my first time making them? You know what I mean? So that's definitely something that came to light in the past year. I need to stop searching for the latest and the greatest and just work on intentionally practicing a couple of patterns and making them over and over again so that they become familiar and things I have experience with. So it's not a new struggle every single time I open like a new project, right? The last thing I want to talk about, and this I think will wrap up our video, is the idea that mistakes are part of the process. And this is really hard for me. And it sounds silly because, you know, of my work and career choice, and this is completely counterintuitive to what I teach my students. But for myself, it's hard for me to accept that the first time you make something is not going to be perfect, because I intend for it to be fabulous and wonderful. And it's just going to be great. It has to be great. That is the only result that can happen. Now, of course, that's not the truth, and that never really turns out that way. So for me, it's, you know, learning to accept that if it doesn't turn out the first time, like, that's okay, and expect it not to turn out the first time. I have huge expectations for the things that I do, my own personal projects, and it's almost setting up myself for failure. Like, hello. But after reading, and this kind of comes from the book, the audiobook, well, it's also a book that I listened to called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. I've mentioned it in my 2021 personal resolutions, and that really like put it in black and white for me, that you need to do the hard work, and intentional practice will get you better, but you're gonna make a lot of mistakes and expect to make mistakes and then just move on. You know, so those are the couple of things I really learned and solidified in 2020. I wonder what kind of things came to light in your life over the past year. I'd love to hear about them. If you're a maker of any kind, whether you're a sewist or not, share with me your thoughts down below. If you have resolutions of your own for this new year, I'd love to hear that as well, whether they're project-based or practice-based. Talk to me in the comments down below, and I can't wait to see what you've got to say. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I will see you very soon. Bye.